7110, student accommodation. Suham, Assistant Superintendent of Facility Services, will provide the executive summary. Ms. Ham.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to briefly go through what we're working on today, and to put it into context, there are several policies relating to facilities planning, and so this is in your package and kind of gives you an overview of all of the facilities planning policies. So policy 7100 is the overview student accommodation policy. We're just making some procedural changes to update our terminology. 7101 is regarding building permits and code enforcement. We're not making any changes. 7110, we are making changes to this policy. Most of the changes in the policy, and I'll walk through them with you, are relating to just updating our definitions and making language consistent with policies 5120 and 5121. These are policies under Ms. Archer's Equity, Innovation, and Choice division that are relating to assignment within the district and controlled open enrollment. So we're trying to make sure that we don't have duplicative language in our policies. Hence, we are also looking at repealing 7120, but also that we have consistent language among policies that deal with similar topics. The major changes that we're making are really in the Administrative Procedure 7110, and this is the administrative procedure relating to attendance boundary changes. And we're making some significant changes, and I have these on your agenda to look at today because I wanted you to be aware of the scope of the changes that we're recommending. We've gone through, since I've been here for the past 5 years or so, we've gone through several rounds of some fairly significant boundary change proposals, and working with the team, we've realized that there are some weaknesses in our process that I thought we could update what we are doing in order to both better involve the public and also be a little bit more efficient in how we do our process. So I will get into that, and that's really the meat of what I'm going to be talking about today. And then we're not making any changes to the school closing procedure or the school closing analysis procedure, but we are recommending appeal of policy 7120, which is the one that is duplicative with policies 5120 and 5121. So that's pretty much an overview of what we're looking at in the whole context of the facilities planning policy suite. So let me talk about the student accommodation policy 7120. This is kind of the overview of what we're doing. But if you go to page 9, which is where I'll take you. I'm sorry, 7110, I don't know what I said, but I meant 7110. So 7110, these are the changes to the policy. And what we're doing in this section is just cleaning up the definitions. We had a number of different definitions, some of which were used randomly throughout policies and procedures, and we wanted to make sure we're consistent. So we have the major definition is the fish definition, which is also referred to as total capacity. That phrase is also used in 5120 and 5121, so we wanted to make sure we had the right definition. Total capacity then is both the permanent capacity, meaning the school building, as well as any relocatables that provide student stations. The remaining changes are simply definitional changes. You see the use of educational location option, controlled open enrollment, again, consistency with other policies. We are deleting the strategy of cap and bus. That's not been something the board's been considering in the past, and it is nowhere else in our recommended strategies, so we took it out of this one. And then we modified the language regarding new capacity to include planning, budgeting, and designing for, as well as constructing new capacity. Sometimes we do need to stand up some planning work in order to evaluate where we need new capacity, and I think we'll see that coming up in the future as we all go back to school. We'll be looking at where we are going to need some additional student stations based on growth in the community, and so we will need to be doing some planning activities ahead of constructing new capacity. And then I also just wanted to note there is implementation flexibility that is already in board policy, and this became important when we got to talking about how we were going to handle going back to school in the environment of social distancing and whether or not we may need to make some moves and be able to be more flexible in how we assign students to schools and student stations. So that flexibility is already in policy, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. So those are the policy changes. But let me walk you through the administrative procedure changes. This is a flow chart that is proposed, and this kind of talks through what we're doing and what we would like to do. We have a boundary change team proposed, and that is primarily our internal staff, and these are the leadership folks as well as folks that are related specifically to the schools that would be affected. We put the boundary change team together. We evaluate whether or not we need attendance boundary changes. If so, then we develop the proposals based on data in terms of membership counts, transportation issues, demographics, all those types of things. We take those proposals to the cabinet and ultimately to a board workshop. The board will review and provide feedback. Depending on the outcome of the workshop, we would either move forward or not. And then if we are moving forward, we go into a public input phase. And this is really where the changes are going to occur. In the past, we have asked you to appoint an evaluation committee member, and we've brought in an evaluation committee that includes both your representatives as well as some staff folks. And we've asked them to score proposals. And that worked really well when you're comparing two proposals for the same thing. But we've been comparing one proposal with itself. And so the scoring really didn't appear to be relevant. And from a staff perspective, we felt that it was much more important to have a public involvement process that is really customized for the particular circumstance. So if we're affecting one or two families, we may have the principal reach out to those families directly and just have that conversation. If we're affecting neighborhoods, we would anticipate going through our municipal partners, our county partners, getting local governments involved, bringing those neighborhoods in, and just doing a more customized approach to public involvement. And so that would be the major difference in the administrative procedure as it's written now and as it would be implemented in the future. And then again, we would bring that input back for final review and then go through the typical process through the information agenda, the action agenda, and board approval. And what that looks like in procedure, what that looks like in the procedure is the language that creates the boundary change team, talks about controlled open enrollment and references policy 5121. Similarly, talks about 5120 and the criteria for attendance boundary changes. It does eliminate the evaluation committee. And then we talk through the general procedure, preliminary proposals. And this is the section on public input where we've made the major changes. So we talk about gathering information from communities of potentially affected schools and using whatever tools we have available, which might include social media, focus groups, public meetings, surveys. I think there's different ways to reach the community depending upon the scope and magnitude of the boundary change proposal. But we really want to be sure to customize what we do to right size it for the boundary change proposal that is being considered. And then also note that we've included submitting to the capital outlay. This is part of our interlocal agreement. The capital outlay committee is basically our municipal representatives, and they're typically either city managers or city planners. But we want to make sure that we are keeping our municipalities engaged because they also have direct relationships with your constituents and are often asked about our attendance boundary change proposals. So we want to make sure that we're communicating well with those folks so that everybody understands what we have on deck. So that is the kind of the crux of what we're doing on 7110, and this probably might be a good time to pause and take any questions.
I just had one. In the administrative procedures in B, in light of what we just voted on as far as the reorganization of the cabinet, do we need to change the language? Because we're going to have to go back and fix that because it still says in B3 and B7, it's still using the assistant superintendent of,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We'll take care of that.
and
7120 is simply the repeal of 7120, and that is because those topics are addressed in 5120 and 5121 that I believe those were both updated late last year. So we are not making any changes. We're just simply repealing this. Thank you.
what? Oh.
Good afternoon. So we are proposing a simplified version of policy 9800 for charter schools. Because the state legislation changes every year regarding charters, we would have to come back and revisit this annually. And sometimes they make very small changes, and other times they make very large changes. But otherwise, it makes more sense just to simply say we are going to follow Florida Statute 1002.33 and leave it at that. So we are going to update it in a more generalized policy, and then unfortunately Neola makes a recommendation that they use the exact language from 100.233, which again is 18 pages of statute. And so our recommendation, again, is just to make it short, sweet, and simple. So this Charter School 9800 is what is currently in play. And I don't want to go through all of this, but as you page down and you go through this version and the corrected version, we've taken about 18 pages and condensed it down to a couple of paragraphs and a list, still allowing us to authorize charter schools per this particular Florida statute, and the ability to non-renew or terminate as well. So we're not taking any authority away from Brevard Public Schools Governing Board. We're just going to abide by, and this one has not been renewed since 2014. So any questions? I don't think you want me to read all those goodies on that.
Simplify.
Okay, thanks.
I wonder if I have time to drive home, Matt. How long?
What's that?
I wonder if I drive home. I wonder if I have time to make it all the way home, or if I should just sit here through yours. Yeah.